Holy shit.
Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and welcome to a little bit of Duke mod madness. Today we are checking out a mod by the name of Alien Armageddon. This one has been requested a whole bunch of times, and having finally played it for myself, I can finally understand why. For the uninitiated, Alien Armageddon takes place after the events of Duke 3D and has our old friend Duke Nukem rudely interrupted by a cataclysmic alien invasion while he's trying to kick back, relax, and enjoy the company of many scantily clad ladies by the pool. Naturally, there is only one reasonable reaction when it comes to such a heinous interruption of Duke Nukem's fun times.
Son of a bitch must pay.
As far as introductions go, opening level Bombshell is one heck of a doozy, throwing you straight into the fray and wasting relatively little time when it comes to showering you with weapons and presenting you with new enemies to deal with. One such early variety will actually grant you the railgun, but for those of you hoping for a short-order gore-soaked obliterator, you'll find that its rounds are of a much less OP sort. Instead, it's tooled to fit much more into the sniper rifle role, as is the enemy that wields it, often found lurking atop high vantage points. You'll find that there's plenty of those littered around the lion's share of this map, as Bombshell opens itself up into those alien-ravaged city streets. If anything, I'd say that this map is probably one of the most explorable in Alien Armageddon. There's just so much shit to do, so much shit to see, so much shit you wish you could unsee. Oh my god, where is the eye bleach? Where is the eye bleach? I need it. Stat! It's basically the opposite of how an introductory level should typically go. Give you like a small slice of the pie to familiarize yourself with the pacing and the layout and the style of the thing before giving you the bigger portion, the bigger deal, with extra filling and maybe a dollop of gravy. But no, this gives you the entire pie all at once, additional gravy, maybe a side, and just says, stuff your fucking face, fat boy, because this is pretty much how it's gonna be the entire way through. To that end, yes, I did find myself quite lost during certain sections of this level, straight up confused in fact when it came to investigating various portions of it, because I could never entirely be sure whether a section I'd blundered my way into was vital for my own personal progression, or just something that will result in a few helpful pickups come the end of it. But crucially, I was never bored by this. This was all thoroughly entertaining exploration. As I previously mentioned, there's just so much shit to see and do during the course of this that whatever direction you face yourself in, you're bound to run into something, and if it so happens that you serendipitously stumble across a keycard, the places where you use them are in fact big and clearly labeled enough where it's a little bit of a light bulb moment. It's like, oh, good, I can progress now. But even then, there's always that little nagging doubt in the back of your head that you might have overlooked something, that you should investigate as much as you possibly can. Things such as this, where you not only run into our dear friend Mario, non-copyright infringing Mario, but you also get your hands on a rather helpful explosive shell upgrade for the shotgun, which just makes it an absolute face wrecker. Anyway, after some additional drunken stumbling through the level, I finally found myself a blue keycard, which helpfully allowed me to move on to a new section of the level. By this point, however, I curiously had managed to acquire almost everything in the armory, meaning that I was feeling pretty confident when it came to taking on whatever jetpack douchebag this appears to be. I'm gonna roll with some kind of roided up enforcer, but in any case, say hello to Shelly. That's right, she's looking a little different from her recent stint in Iron Maiden. Distinctly more blonde, distinctly less clothed, but hey, guess what? That's something you can help her out with. I ain't kidding. You can change your outfit. You can change Duke's outfit. Heck, you can even swap who you want to play as, because during this section I thought, why not? Let's see what Shelly's got in the tank. And she does indeed come equipped with an augmented suite of weaponry. But one thing you'll have to consider when swapping between these characters is the health does not exist independently of one another. Whatever your health was as Duke will follow over to Shelly and vice versa, so it's not always going to be an easy get-out-of-jail-free card when it comes to a dicey situation. And even then, if one of you does indeed come a cropper, you can easily just go up to them, press use, and that'll get him right back up to fighting strength once more. As for that extra weaponry that Shelly can wield, unfortunately I'm not too great on the terminology, but you'll have seen me using the thermal laser type rifle earlier. We've got placeable turrets which replace the pipe bombs, and we've also got the incendiary rocket launcher here, which I may or may not have just set Duke on fire with. Much like the shotgun upgrade I got for Duke earlier, Shelly can also obtain weapon upgrades of her own, and as that implies, they are indeed unique to that character, so if you do want to take them for a spin, you will have to make sure you swap between them. But refreshingly, you don't have to use command mode every single time you want to do that, because mercifully, as you can see on screen in the bottom left, there is a hotkey assigned to swapping very quickly between characters. But how about the act of having to fight alongside an AI-controlled co-op partner? Lord knows I've played enough games in the past where having to babysit one of those just becomes an absolute chore. Thankfully, the partner AI here in Alien Armageddon is relatively unobtrusive. They stay reasonably close, provide some nice additional firepower as backup, and seldom get lost. If that does indeed become the case, however, and they fall by the wayside, there is a teleport option that will helpfully bring them to you, rather than you having to go comb through the level for them. Honestly, at this point, I'm debating whether I should even tell you about any of the other levels during the course of Alien Armageddon, because practically every element of Alien Armageddon is introduced during the course of its opening level. It's pretty expansive. I'm not even kidding, it feels something like 90% of the enemy roster is present by the time you reach the end of this level, including mini versions of recognizable bosses from Duke 3D. To its credit though, it does introduce a few more, let's say, unique specimens in the Alien roster, such as the roided up enforcers that we came across earlier, and of course the roided up pig cops, which themselves come in a few varieties. Blue armor, a little easier to deal with in comparison to, let's say, the red armor versions, which come equipped with grenade launchers and functionally act more like mini-bosses than anything else. I'm not even done talking about the extra weaponry you can acquire. You can get the laser pistols from some of the cycloids, you can get this augmented version of the Shrinker, which... Wait, I don't think that's how it works. It's supposed to turn them into chicks. Why did this gun turn him into a businessman? Screw it, need a change of pace, we're moving on to the second map, and helpfully, the second map does indeed differentiate itself from the first by having you begin as Shelly, and much like how the first level went, partway through, you'll be joined by Duke. And honestly, I think this is a pretty smart way to go about giving the player an insight into the other half of the character equation, because there's a danger when you've got selectable characters to play as that the player will never bother. They'll just be content to have that other character as an AI partner. And it'd just be a shame to see that extra work go to waste. As for the level itself, Hard Rain is a pretty nice change of scenery. Kicking you off in the IMF offices, it has you fight your way onto the rooftops, where you discover that this portion of the city has been flooded and left partially underwater. As you can imagine, this leads to a fair amount of submerged shenanigans, and oh boy, I hope you like octobrains, because guess what you'll find down here? A crap load of octobrains. Oh, and maybe a shark. Did I mention this rocket launcher freezes things too? That's a thing. Finding the keycard somewhere in the flooded zone will grant you access to an adjacent building's rooftop and net you the jetpack, which curiously your co-op partner always seems to have, but when it comes to you being in control, you have to go and net one for yourself. Acquiring the jetpack will grant you access to a previously inaccessible building across the way from the IMF and will swiftly engage you with a room full of absolute bullshit. The sting is lessened somewhat by the presence of an awesome Kung Fu NPC, but let's face it, no one likes a room full of hit scanners, and enforcers, they can fuck off. Getting out of the restaurant isn't made any easier thanks to the presence of a battle lord constantly bellowing outside. Oh, and a riot pig cop. He's not so bad. He's easier to take care of. Eventually I stumble on an effective strategy for dealing with the battle lord, which resembles a hyper-violent game of peekaboo. After that, it's once more into the drink as our freshly acquired yellow keycard grants us access to a submerged alien ship, helpfully populated with a few oxygen bubble vents, preventing us from drowning and suffering an untimely death. It certainly lends a fair degree of tension to these underwater encounters as you desperately try to balance keeping your oxygen meter full with filling your enemies full of lead. That tension is certainly not helped any by the presence of sentry drones careening around the area with that trademark nightmare-inducing noise, and quite frankly the only thing preventing it from being ever more nightmarish is the merciful absence of the drowning music from Sonic the Hedgehog. You know what one I mean. You probably thought of it as soon as you saw those goddamn bubbles. Diving ever deeper, you'll eventually emerge in a cavern full of pig cops that in part have taken up recreational off-roading, but these vehicles aren't too tricky to take down. A few well-aimed rocket blasts or even explosive shells from the shotty will be enough to send a custom license plate careening across your screen. Next to the restaurant section, I'd say that this is probably one of the more challenging sections of this particular map, thanks to the presence of multiple red armor roided out piggies. Where this wins out in terms of enjoyability, however, is that you have so much more freedom of movement when it comes to engaging such enemies. On top of that, minimal amount of hit scan bullshit. Always appreciated. I quite enjoy the way this level ends as well, with a really nice shot in the distance of a shadowy figure that may have been responsible for all of this alien asshattery so far, but this pretty much sums up the end of the level and brings us swiftly onto the next, where we are once again reunited with dear old Duke. If I'm going to be honest, Sukh City is probably my least favorite map in the entire episode. I mean, for one, I don't have a great affinity with underwater sections to begin with, and secondly, it's just kind of dull. I mean, don't get me wrong, I greatly appreciate the environmental design that's gone into this, the sunken, ruined buildings that litter the area and the still operable flashing neon signs lighting the way, but when you get down to it, it's just a series of large underwater caverns, largely populated by some of my least favorite enemies to fight. On the plus side, however, this is also one of the shortest maps in this episode, meaning that if you're similarly inclined to myself, it'll be over in relatively short order. That is, unless you get a little snagged on the boss lurking at the end of it. Oh boy, dealing with Fat Boy over here is a joy, and by joy I mean akin to putting a pencil up my urethra. This is a bullet sponge and a half of a boss. It can swim faster at you than you can retreat from it, and if it catches up with you, it will make you go squish. The only recourse you have in this is making sure it gets snagged on the various bits of geometry in the arena. The only other thing I guess you could probably take advantage of is the fact that every now and again it will decide that your co-op partner needs to die quicker than you do and bulldoze through them, thus affording you a few extra hits, but more than anything, the vast majority of this fight just feels like hot luck. Next map is Area 59. I guess Area 69 was already taken? Shame, really. But anyway, this is your common garden variety secret underground base, and if I'm gonna be perfectly honest, I actually kind of struggled to remember the lion's share of what actually happens during the course of this map. It's not that it's bad, it's certainly an improvement over the preceding one, it's just that there wasn't a lot that stuck out during the course of this that I would call memorable. I don't know, maybe I'm being too harsh, but it certainly pales in comparison to the wonderful overstuffed craziness of the first two levels in Alien Armageddon. At the very least, we get some Cycloid Sonic the Hedgehog wannabes, what with that spin dash attack. This level also introduces you to the Dukinators, last seen in Duke Nukem Forever's expansion called The Doctor Who Cloned Me, if I'm not mistaken. Very notable for the lack of actual cloning. It's mostly cyborgs. Yeah, they really screwed up with that title, didn't they? In any case, they can prove to be occasionally resilient foes, their legs blasting away to leave them a crawling torso, still very, very able to fire back at you with those familiar-looking plasma rifles. But if I'm gonna be perfectly honest, this is a level that doesn't ever really feel like it truly gets going. And by the time it feels like it might just be about to, it's practically at the end. And even then, it's a room full of Octobrains. I've got to give it credit, of course, for having some timed chambers that open up and introduce more Octobrains during the course of the fight, but honestly, been there, done that. Next! And so we arrive at the hidden base. A hidden base located within a hidden base. A baseception, if you will. Housing the one, the only, the mechanical douchebag to end all mechanical douchebags, Dr. Proton. Yes, it was him all along. And you know it's him, because he sends you this tram that doesn't work. How much more nefarious could you get? Forcing me to walk? Douche. So for me, this map is quite notable for the fact that it actually does something with the partner swap mechanic. Up until now, it's just been something you do in order to mess around with other weapons, but here, I believe it's actively required for you to pass through these airlocks. It honestly took me a little while to think of it, but if you make them wait and then swap between them once you flick the button, there you go. You have access to the other side. And it's just odd that this is only being introduced now, during the course of the final level. I mean, this is a prime example of intelligent use of mechanics that could have easily jazzed up some of the less entertaining sections of, let's say, the preceding 2 levels. At the same time, it would have also given me advance warning of this being a thing, rather than just suddenly presenting it to the player and saying, "Figure it out, dumbass." As for the structure of the level itself, once you figure out the airlock trick, it is pretty much a case of rinse and repeat. Get one card from one side, get to the other airlock, and do it again. Granted, they do change up the composition of enemies you'll fight in either, but it's a straight shot to the keycard either way. All in all, really short map. Probably the shortest map. It honestly makes me wonder if the preceding map would have benefited in any way from having this just simply stitched onto the end of it. But then again, maybe the authors were a little worried about the actual quantity of maps in the episode, because there does feel like a decided amount of front-loading in this episode when it comes to the sheer amount of content present in the first 2 levels versus the rest of them. It's kind of noticeable. But all that aside, I can't help but greatly enjoy this corridor on the lead-up to the final boss room.
My old friends, Duke Nukem and Bombshell. I see you've stumbled into my production facility. I'd like you to help out with some quality assurance testing. We wouldn't want anything but the best for Earth's future defense force, now would we?
Holy shit, was that some actual genuine voice acting for this mod? By the actual voice actor for Dr. Proton himself? Neat! As you can imagine, my expectations for this battle were set reasonably low as a result of having to endure that mid-episode underwater boss battle earlier, but I have to say that this does a far and away better job of keeping me engaged in the fight. For starters, it doesn't drop you in with Dr. Proton right off the bat. Instead, it introduces you to a smorgasbord of his experiments, which you'll have to deal with first before the big guy turns up himself. As an enemy, Dr. Proton has a variety of attacks at his disposal, one of which being a machine gun burst, which I believe is hit scan based. He can fling a few energy projectiles in your general direction, as well as lob what I believe are explosive projectiles, which you best watch out for at range. Every now and again, he'll also pull out a leaping attack. Thankfully, I've not been caught out by that one, but in the meantime, you'll have plenty of opportunity to skim around the edges of the arena for additional health and ammo resupplies, not to mention cover. All in all, this is a really well-judged encounter, nicely paced, fun to fight, and a good way to cap off the episode.
Enjoy your victory.
What a nice chap. I think I will. I'd say that playing this first episode of Alien Armageddon has been quite the interesting experience. I've certainly been entertained for the duration of playing this, but I would say that a lot of that entertainment was strangely front-loaded. It's a mod where it feels like it blows its load a little too early. But even then, even with that uneven sense of pacing, it's still got more than enough interesting stuff kicking around to keep you engaged, even during its more, let's say, saggier moments. You got the character switching, which grants you access to a whole suite of augmented and alternate weapons. Honestly, I wish it was explored much more. Like I said, that last level should not be the only place where screwing around with character switching factors into progression during the course of a level. That's something that could be explored so much further. Heck, you could even factor in the alternate weapons into how you solve a puzzle when it comes to level progression, something that only Shelly can do versus Duke, for sake of example. But But in terms of other stuff that I've quite enjoyed during the course of this, I really enjoyed the addition of additional monsters during the course of Alien Armageddon, the roided out pig cops adding a much appreciated extra bit of spice to certain encounters. But if I had to pick a favorite enemy type out of the new bunch that I've experienced here, I'd definitely say that the Uber Enforcers were a highlight for me. And part of that is certainly down to the fact that their encounters are well thought out. They're never just haphazardly chucked into a situation. They always feel momentous, such as that first encounter when Bombshell first turns up, and they've got some interesting attacks. The jetpack attacks, they can fling rockets at you, and my personal favorite, they can literally poop out mines. If you go back and watch that footage, you'll see me actually detonate a poop-shaped mine with a tiny little fuse sticking out the top of it. Love that shit. So, on the basis of that singular aspect of this mod alone, should you give Alien Armageddon a whirl for yourself? I'm gonna go with yes. Yes, you should. Granted, it's uneven, but still, fun wins out, and trust me, there is a lot of fun to be had here during the course of Alien Armageddon. So, in that regard, if this sounds like it floats your boat, tickles your pickle, does something else vaguely euphemistic, then you'll be happy to know that the link, as usual, is in the description below. While I'm at it, I'd like to give a great big thank you to my wonderful patrons over on Patreon. Thank you so very much for supporting the channel and for helping to make content like this possible. If you're interested in lending a hand yourself, maybe you'd like to see your name in the credits, maybe you'd like to gain early access to my videos before anyone else, heck, maybe you just enjoy the smell of burning money. If that's the case, you'll find the link to my Patreon page also in the description below. But before I go, for all those curious, yes, I am in fact aware that there are additional episodes available for Alien Armageddon right now. I just didn't really fancy the idea of trying to shoehorn an entire opinion about Duke It Out in DC into one single edition of Duke Mod Madness, so I hope you'll forgive me that at the very least. Lord knows I've managed to omit enough details during the course of this video. You certainly wouldn't want me glossing over an entire other episode, but in that regard, don't worry. I'm sure I'll get round to it eventually. In the meantime, I certainly hope you've enjoyed your stay. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments, and feel free to suggest any mods you'd like to see me cover in future editions of Duke Mod Madness. This has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.